When I told my wife about my coworker's love confession, she said, "Why would anyone want you when I don't even want you?" She was still laughing 5 minutes later while holding her stomach and wiping tears from her eyes, like I'd just told the best joke she'd ever heard, and I stood there in our kitchen holding the letter that Caroline from work had given me. Wait, let me get this straight. Someone actually told you they have feelings for you? Someone with eyes and options? She grabbed the letter from my hand, reading it out loud in a mocking voice. She says she's been in love with you for 2 years. 2 years of what? Watching you eat sandwiches at your desk and wear the same 5 shirts? The letter was sincere from a woman who'd been nothing but kind to me. Caroline is a good person. She's smart and successful. My wife Lisa snorted. Then she needs therapy because no smart, successful woman would want you. Look at yourself. You're 41 and balding. Your stomach hangs over your belt. You make $60,000 a year. What exactly does she see in you? She walked around me like she was examining damaged goods. Is she blind? Desperate? Does she have a fetish for mediocre men? Lisa pulled out her phone and started looking up Caroline's social media. Oh my God, she's actually pretty. This has to be a prank. Did your coworkers put her up to this? She showed me Caroline's photo like it was evidence of a crime. No one who looks like that would want someone who looks like you. I'd been with Lisa for 15 years, and she'd spent most of them telling me how lucky I was that she settled for me. Caroline says she admires my kindness, my work ethic, my sense of humor. Lisa doubled over, laughing again. Your sense of humor? You haven't made me laugh in a decade except right now. Your kindness? You mean being a doormat? Your work ethic? You mean staying at the same dead-end job forever? She called her sister on speaker. Diana, you have to hear this. Someone told Robert they have feelings for him, a real person, not a bot or a scammer, an actual woman. Diana started laughing too. Stop lying. Who would want Robert? Remember when we used to joke that you were doing charity work by marrying him? They'd made that joke at our wedding, in their speeches, in front of my family. It's true. Some coworker named Caroline. She's probably having a mental breakdown. Lisa pulled up more photos, then started a group video call with her mother and 3 sisters. Everyone needs to see this. Robert thinks a woman wants him. Her mother appeared on screen. Robert? Our Robert? The one who sweats when he eats? Her other sisters joined, laughing. Is she homeless? Does she need money? Lisa was showing them Caroline's photos. Look at her. She has a master's degree, owns her own condo, does marathons. Why would she want Robert who gets winded walking upstairs? Her mother had a theory. Maybe she lost a bet? Or it's community service? They all laughed while Lisa turned the phone to show them me standing there. Look at his face. He actually believes someone could want him. Caroline apparently wants him, I said quietly. Lisa's face changed. She's not serious. She probably feels sorry for you. Maybe you cried at work about how pathetic you are. Oh my God, did you pay her? She grabbed her purse, checking the bank statements. Did you hire someone to pretend to like you? Her family was still on the phone, suggesting theories. Maybe she's doing a documentary on desperate men. Maybe it's a sociology experiment on how low attractive women will go. Maybe she has brain damage. Lisa suddenly gasped. I bet she doesn't know you're married. You took off your ring, didn't you? You're tricking her. I showed my ring still on my finger. She knows I'm married. She said she waited 2 years hoping things would change but couldn't stay quiet anymore. Lisa was getting angry now. You probably lied to her, told her I'm abusive or cold, made yourself the victim. I never talked about my marriage at work. I pulled away and got my phone. Maybe Caroline sees something you never bothered to look for. Lisa laughed. There's nothing to see. Your wallpaper, background noise, a placeholder human. You're what women settle for when they give up on life. I grabbed Caroline's letter and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Lisa demanded. To thank Caroline for being the first person in 15 years to say something kind to me. Lisa screamed with laughter. Kind? She pities you. When she sees you up close in real light, she'll run. Your weird-shaped head, your uneven ears, that thing you do with your mouth when you think, the way you walk like a broken robot. She'll be disgusted. But Caroline wasn't disgusted. She smiled when she saw me, said I had kind eyes, gentle hands, a warm smile. Things Lisa said didn't exist. When I filed for divorce, Lisa brought her entire family to court. Your Honor, he can't leave me. Look at him. Then look at me. Even at my worst, I'm better than his best. He'll die alone and unloved without me. The judge stared at her. Ma'am, that's not how divorce works. I woke up the next morning in a hotel room that smelled like stale air and cleaning products. The sheets were scratchy and the pillow was too flat, but I'd slept better than I had in months. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and saw 17 missed calls from Lisa and 12 voicemails. I called work and told them I was sick. My voice sounded hollow when I said it, but my boss didn't ask questions. I spent the next 2 hours sitting on the edge of the bed researching divorce attorneys on my phone. Lisa kept calling. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemails. The first 3 were her screaming about how I was being dramatic and needed to come home immediately. The next 4 switched to mocking laughter about how pathetic I looked leaving with Caroline's letter. The rest alternated between rage and more laughter. By noon, Lisa had started texting me photos of herself with captions about how no one else would ever want me. She sent a selfie with the caption, "This is what you're giving up for what exactly?" Then another one, "You think Caroline will want you when she sees you in daylight?" The messages kept coming. She sent me a voice message where she was laughing, so hard she could barely talk about how I'd looked walking out the door clutching Caroline's letter like it was some kind of treasure. I sat there on the hotel bed holding my phone, and something inside me just broke open. Not in a bad way, in a way that felt like I could finally breathe. I found Jeremy Wallace's office online and called to make an appointment. The receptionist fit me in for 3 that afternoon. I drove 30 minutes to his office in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner and a nail salon. The waiting room had magazines from 6 months ago and a water cooler that made gurgling sounds. Jeremy came out to meet me himself. He was maybe 50 with gray hair and kind eyes that didn't judge when I told him why I was there. We sat in his office and I explained everything. The 15 years of mockery, the video call with her family, the way Lisa had responded to Caroline's letter. Jeremy listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he leaned back in his chair. He explained that emotional abuse was valid grounds for divorce, even without physical violence or cheating. He said I had a strong case and we could move forward quickly if that's what I wanted. His paralegal Rosemary came in with paperwork. She had red hair and smiled at me like I was a person worth smiling at. She helped me fill out forms while Jeremy explained what would happen next. He warned me that Lisa would probably get worse once she was served with papers. He said I should prepare for things to escalate before they got better. I signed everything and paid the retainer with money I'd been keeping in a separate account Lisa didn't know about. I went back to work the next day. Caroline saw me walk in and her face changed immediately. She followed me to my desk. I told her I was filing for divorce and her whole expression shifted through relief, then guilt for feeling relieved. She hugged me right there in the middle of the office. It was the first real hug I'd gotten in years where someone actually meant it. Her arms felt warm and safe, and I had to fight not to cry into her shoulder. Kieran found me at lunch in the break room. He sat down across from me with his sandwich. He said he was glad I was finally leaving Lisa. I must have looked surprised because he explained that everyone at work knew how she treated me. She'd shown up at company holiday parties and summer picnics and openly mocked me in front of my colleagues. He said they'd all seen it, but nobody knew how to help because I never complained or acknowledged it was happening. He squeezed my shoulder and told me I deserved better. I ate my sandwich and realized I'd been living in a nightmare while pretending everything was normal. 3 days later, Lisa got served with divorce papers at her workplace. I know because within an hour my phone was ringing with her screaming on the other end. She said I was humiliating her. Everyone at her job was asking questions. I was destroying her reputation. How dare I do this to her publicly? I hung up and she called back 6 more times. I stopped answering. That evening I was in my hotel room watching television when someone started banging on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw Lisa standing there with her face red and her fists pounding the door. She was yelling that I needed to let her in so we could talk about this like adults. I called the front desk, and hotel security came within 5 minutes. I recorded video on my phone of her shouting that I was having an affair with Caroline, and she was going to prove it in court. Security escorted her out while she screamed the whole way down the hall. I sent the video to Jeremy immediately. Jeremy filed for a temporary restraining order the next morning. We had a hearing 2 days later. The judge looked at the video and Lisa's voicemails and granted the order without much discussion. Lisa was served with papers saying she couldn't contact me except through her attorney. The judge told her any violations would result in contempt charges. I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in 15 years. That feeling lasted exactly 6 hours. Diana called my phone that evening. I answered because the restraining order only covered Lisa. Diana's voice was syrupy sweet. She said Lisa was devastated. I was being so cruel. Marriages had rough patches, and I should give Lisa another chance to work on things. I told Diana that 15 years of mockery wasn't a rough patch and hung up. She called back twice, but I didn't answer. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with Skylar from HR. Her office was on the 3rd floor in a corner with windows that looked out over the parking lot. She motioned for me to sit down and close the door behind us. I explained that I was documenting things for my divorce and needed to know if the company had any records of Lisa's behavior at work events. Skylar leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. She admitted they'd been worried about me for years, but didn't know how to address it since Lisa was my spouse and I never said anything. She pulled up files on her computer showing dates of company picnics, holiday parties, and team building events where Lisa had attended as my +1. At the summer picnic 2 years ago, Lisa had loudly commented that I looked pregnant in my polo shirt while standing near the food tables where at least a dozen coworkers could hear. At the holiday party last December, she'd introduced herself to the new hires by saying she was married to the office furniture because I blended into the walls so well. Skylar had written up notes about both incidents but couldn't take action because I never filed a complaint. She asked if I was okay, and I realized I didn't know how to answer that question anymore. I thanked her and left with printed copies of her documentation tucked into a folder. That afternoon, Caroline texted asking if I wanted to grab coffee after work. We met at a place 2 blocks from the office with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture. She ordered a latte, and I got black coffee because that's what I always got. We sat at a small table near the window, and she looked nervous, fidgeting with her cup. She said she was sorry for causing problems in my marriage, and I should have kept my feelings to myself. I stopped her before she could finish. I explained that she didn't cause anything because the problems existed for 15 years before she ever handed me that letter. She just helped me see clearly what had been wrong the whole time. Caroline's eyes got wet, and she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. She said Lisa was cruel, and I deserved someone who saw my value. We talked for over an hour about everything except my divorce. She told me about her marathon training and how she was trying to qualify for Boston. She mentioned her parents lived in Florida, and she visited them twice a year. I realized I'd worked with her for 2 years and knew almost nothing about her life because I'd been too buried in my own misery to ask. When we left the coffee shop, the sun was setting and the streetlights were coming on. 3 days later, Jeremy called to tell me Lisa had hired an attorney. Her name was Delilah Caruso, and she had a reputation for nasty tactics in divorce cases. Jeremy sent me copies of the motions Delilah had filed that morning. The papers claimed I abandoned the marriage without cause, that I was having an affair with a coworker, and that I owed Lisa all her legal fees plus temporary spousal support while the divorce was pending. The motion demanded $3,000 a month in support based on Lisa's claim that she'd become accustomed to a certain lifestyle during our marriage. I read through the papers twice, feeling my stomach turn. Everything in the filing was twisted to make me look like the villain. It said I left without warning, that I refused to communicate or work on the marriage, that I was cruel and vindictive. There was no mention of 15 years of mockery or emotional abuse. And Jeremy scheduled a call for that evening to go over our response strategy. When I talked to Jeremy that night, he sounded completely calm. He explained that Lisa's claims were baseless since I left due to her abuse, and we had no children or significant shared assets. The house was in both our names, but we only had about $30,000 in equity after 15 years because Lisa spent money as fast as I earned it. She bought clothes she never wore, kitchen gadgets she never used, and insisted on eating out 4 times a week at restaurants we couldn't really afford. Jeremy said Delilah was trying to intimidate me into a bad settlement by filing aggressive motions right away. He'd seen this tactic before, and it rarely worked once we got in front of a judge with actual evidence. He asked if I was okay, and I told him I was tired but holding up. He said to get some rest because the next few months would be difficult, but we had a strong case. The following week, I had my first appointment with Mia, the therapist who specialized in emotional abuse recovery. Her office was in a converted house with a waiting room that had soft lighting and comfortable chairs. She came out to get me at exactly 3 o'clock and led me back to her office. The room had bookshelves covering one wall, a couch, and 2 chairs facing each other. She asked me to tell her what brought me in, and I started explaining about the divorce. The words came out slowly at first, and then faster as I described 15 years of constant mockery and belittling. I told her about Lisa's family laughing at me on video calls, about being called wallpaper and background noise, about being told no one would ever want me. And saying it all out loud made it real in a way I'd been avoiding. My voice cracked when I got to the part about Caroline's letter and Lisa's response. Mia listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said she was glad I came in because what I described was serious emotional abuse. The session lasted 50 minutes, and when I left, I felt exhausted like I'd run a marathon. At my second session with Mia the next week, she helped me understand that Lisa's behavior fit clear patterns of emotional abuse and something called gaslighting. She explained that abusers often make their targets doubt their own perception of reality by denying things happened or claiming the target is too sensitive. Lisa's family enabling her mockery created a system where I was always the target and never allowed to be right. If I objected to being insulted, they'd say I couldn't take a joke. If I got upset, they'd say I was being dramatic. Mia said this kind of systematic undermining destroys a person's sense of self-worth over time. She asked if I'd always been quiet and unsure of myself, and I realized I hadn't been before I met Lisa. In college, I'd been confident enough to ask Lisa out in the first place. Somewhere over 15 years, I'd become the person she said I was. 2 days after that session, my mom called to tell me that Lisa's mother had contacted her. Lisa's mom spent 20 minutes trying to convince my mom to talk me into dropping the divorce. She said Lisa was devastated and marriages required work, and I was giving up too easily. My mom, who never liked Lisa from the beginning, told her that Lisa treated me terribly for 15 years, and she was glad I was finally standing up for myself. Lisa's mom got angry and said my mom clearly didn't know the whole story. My mom responded that she knew exactly what she'd witnessed at family gatherings where Lisa mocked me in front of everyone. The call ended badly with Lisa's mom hanging up. My mom called me immediately after to make sure I was okay and to tell me she supported my decision completely. It was the first time in years she'd said she was proud of me. The restraining order hearing happened 2 weeks after I first filed. I got to the courthouse 30 minutes early and met Jeremy in the hallway outside the courtroom. He went over what would happen and reminded me to stay calm no matter what Lisa or her attorney said. When we walked into the courtroom, Lisa was already there with her entire family sitting behind her. Her mother, Diana, and her other 2 sisters all turned to glare at me like I was the villain in this situation. Lisa was dressed in a conservative blue dress and had clearly been crying. Her eyes were red and she dabbed at them with a tissue. Delilah sat next to her in an expensive suit, looking through papers. The bailiff called the case and we all stood while the judge entered. Delilah went first and argued that I was making too much out of normal marital disagreements. She said the hotel incident was just Lisa being upset about sudden abandonment and trying to talk to her husband. She claimed the voicemail messages showed a concerned wife trying to reach her spouse during a crisis. Delilah painted me as someone having a midlife crisis who was blowing up a marriage over minor issues. She suggested the restraining order was unnecessary and vindictive. Jeremy stood up when it was his turn and presented the video footage I'd recorded of Lisa banging on my hotel room door. The judge watched it with no expression while Lisa screamed on camera that I was having an affair and she was going to prove it. Jeremy played 3 of the most unhinged voicemail messages where Lisa called me pathetic, worthless, and said no one would ever want me. The courtroom was completely silent except for Lisa's voice coming from the speaker. The judge looked at Lisa for a long moment and then announced he was extending the restraining order for 6 months. He warned Lisa that any further violations would result in contempt charges and possible jail time. He said the video evidence clearly showed harassment and the voicemail messages demonstrated a pattern of abusive behavior. Lisa's face went bright red, and she started to stand up, but Diana grabbed her arm and physically pulled her back down into her seat. The judge dismissed the hearing and left through the door behind the bench. Jeremy gathered his papers and told me quietly that went as well as we could have hoped. Delilah rushed out of the courtroom without looking at us, while Lisa's family clustered around her near the door. I could feel them staring as Jeremy and I walked past, but I kept my eyes forward and didn't look back. I moved into the apartment 3 days after the restraining order hearing. The place was small and came furnished with basic stuff that looked like it came from a discount furniture store. Beige couch, brown coffee table, a bed that squeaked when I sat on it. But it was quiet, and nobody was there telling me I was worthless, so I slept better that first night than I had in months. The silence felt strange after 15 years of Lisa's voice in my head, pointing out everything wrong with me. I woke up the next morning and made coffee in the tiny kitchen without anyone commenting on how I held the mug wrong or breathed too loud while drinking. Caroline texted me that weekend asking if I needed help getting settled. We met at a home goods store, and she walked with me through the aisles pointing out things I'd need. Dish soap, paper towels, a decent set of pots and pans because the apartment only had 1 scratched frying pan. She kept the conversation light and friendly, never once mentioning the divorce or Lisa or anything heavy. Just normal talk about whether I preferred cotton or microfiber towels and if I wanted plates that could go in the dishwave or microwave. When we loaded everything into my car, she gave me a quick hug and said she was glad I had my own space now. No pressure, no expectations, just kindness that still felt foreign after so many years of the opposite. I was checking my email Monday morning at work when Kieran stopped by my desk looking uncomfortable. He showed me his phone with a Facebook post Lisa had written. She'd posted a long story about how I abandoned her after 15 years for a younger woman at work, how she gave me the best years of her life, and I threw it away for someone who didn't even care about me. The post had dozens of comments from her friends calling me every name you could think of. Cheater, scumbag, loser who couldn't appreciate what he had. Several people said Lisa deserved so much better than someone like me. I felt my face get hot reading the lies she was telling, making herself the victim when she'd spent years tearing me down. Kieran squeezed my shoulder and said not to respond, that everyone who knew us could see through it. I forwarded screenshots of the post to Jeremy that afternoon. He called me back within an hour and told me to document everything but don't engage publicly. He said Lisa was trying to get me angry enough to post something stupid that would make me look bad in court. Her whole strategy was provocation, trying to make me react so she could point to my reaction as proof I was unstable or aggressive. Jeremy said judges see this kind of social media campaign all the time, and it usually backfires on the person doing it. He reminded me to keep my head down and let Lisa dig her own hole with her behavior. The discovery phase started 2 weeks later, and suddenly I was drowning in paperwork. I had to provide copies of every bank statement, credit card bill, and financial document from the past 3 years. Jeremy's office helped me organize everything, but it took hours to gather it all. Then Delilah filed a motion demanding access to my work email, claiming I must have evidence of an affair with Caroline hidden there. The motion used language about how I was clearly hiding something, and Lisa had a right to see proof of my relationship with the other woman. I read it sitting in Jeremy's office feeling sick, because there was no affair, there was nothing to find. But Delilah was trying to make it sound like I was covering up some scandal. Jeremy filed an opposition to the email request, and we had a hearing about it 3 days later. The judge read through both motions with no expression on his face, while Delilah argued that I was being evasive and uncooperative. Jeremy stood up and pointed out that Lisa had provided zero actual evidence of infidelity, just speculation and accusations. He said this was a fishing trip where Delilah hoped to find something embarrassing in my work correspondence, even though it had nothing to do with the marriage. The judge agreed and denied the motion, saying Lisa's attorney needed to provide some basis for her claims, beyond just wanting to look through my private communications. Delilah's face got tight and she gathered her papers quickly. Lisa stood up and walked out of the courtroom before the judge even finished speaking, her heels clicking loud on the floor. I found out through a mutual friend from college that Lisa was telling people I'd been violent with her during our marriage. The friend called me sounding worried and asked if everything was okay, if I needed help, because Lisa had posted in an alumni group about surviving abuse. The lies were so big and so detailed that I couldn't even process them at first. Lisa claimed I'd pushed her, threatened her, controlled all the money, isolated her from friends. None of it was true, but she was out there rewriting 15 years of history to make herself look like the survivor and me look like the monster. Most people who actually knew us didn't believe her, but it still hurt knowing she was spreading that poison around. Mia and I spent the next therapy session talking about the damage from all those years of Lisa's constant mockery. I'd started believing what Lisa said about me being worthless and unlovable. Started thinking maybe I really was all the things she called me, that maybe no decent person would want someone like me. That's why Caroline's kindness felt so shocking at first, because I'd accepted Lisa's version of reality where I didn't deserve basic respect. Mia helped me see how Lisa had worn me down bit by bit until I couldn't even recognize myself anymore. She said it would take time to rebuild what Lisa had torn down, but I was already making progress just by leaving and getting my own space. Jeremy called me on a Thursday afternoon and said Delilah had sent over a settlement proposal. Lisa wanted the house and $20,000 from me to walk away and sign the divorce papers. Jeremy said it was a terrible deal and we should absolutely not accept it. We had no kids, I'd been the main income earner, and Lisa had no grounds to demand that much. He thought if we pushed toward trial, the judge would see Lisa's behavior for what it was, and we'd end up with a much better outcome. I trusted Jeremy's advice, so I told him to reject the offer. I counter-offered through Jeremy, suggesting we sell the house, split whatever equity was left after paying off the mortgage, and each take our own belongings. Clean break with no payments between us. Lisa's response came back the next day, through Delilah saying my offer was insulting, and showed how little I valued Lisa's contributions to the marriage. Delilah wrote that Lisa deserved compensation for the embarrassment and pain I'd caused by abandoning her publicly. The letter made it sound like I owed Lisa money just for the crime of leaving, like she had a right to punish me financially for not staying in a marriage where she treated me like garbage. Jeremy read the response and said we were definitely going to trial because Lisa clearly had no interest in being reasonable. Thanksgiving week came, and I spent Tuesday evening at my apartment eating leftover pizza when Kieran called asking what my plans were for Thursday. I told him I was probably just going to order Chinese food and watch movies, which was the truth since I had nowhere else to go. He said that was unacceptable, and his wife insisted I come to their house for dinner with their family. I tried to say no because I didn't want to impose, but Kieran wouldn't take no for an answer and said they had plenty of food, and his kids were excited to meet the guy from work their dad talked about. Thursday afternoon, I showed up at Kieran's house with a store-bought pie, feeling awkward and out of place. His wife answered the door with a genuine smile and introduced herself as Melissa. Then their 2 kids ran up asking if I was Uncle Kieran's friend from work. The house smelled like turkey and stuffing, and there were family photos everywhere showing happy moments and vacations together. Melissa pulled me into the kitchen where Kieran was mashing potatoes, and he handed me a beer like it was the most natural thing in the world. Their kids showed me their toys and asked me questions about what I did at work with their dad, treating me like a normal person instead of someone to mock. During dinner, everyone talked and laughed and passed dishes around the table without anyone making cruel jokes or putting anyone down. Kieran's daughter told a story about her school play, and everyone listened and encouraged her instead of finding ways to criticize. His son spilled his milk, and Melissa just cleaned it up, saying accidents happen without making him feel terrible about it. I sat there eating turkey and watching this family interact with basic kindness and respect for each other, realizing this was what normal families did. Nobody mocked anyone's appearance or brought up past mistakes to humiliate them. Nobody called anyone worthless or made jokes at someone else's expense. They just enjoyed being together and treated each other like people they actually cared about. After dinner, Kieran and I cleaned up while Melissa got the kids ready for bed, and he asked how I was holding up with everything. I told him days like this made me see how wrong my marriage had been, that I'd forgotten families could actually be kind to each other. He said he was glad I came and that I was welcome anytime, that his door was always open if I needed somewhere to go. The following Monday, Jeremy's office called saying they'd received correspondence from Lisa's attorney. I drove over during my lunch break, and Rosemary handed me a letter that Delilah had sent on Lisa's behalf. The letter was 3 pages long and started by saying Lisa had done a lot of thinking over the past weeks. She wrote that she understood I was going through a difficult time and having what might be a midlife crisis or mental health episode. The letter said she was willing to forgive everything that had happened and take me back if I agreed to drop the divorce immediately. She claimed we could work through our problems together with counseling, and that she recognized both of us had made mistakes in the marriage. Lisa wrote that she missed me and wanted to save our 15 years together, that throwing away our history over one bad fight would be a mistake we'd both regret. The letter made it sound like she was being generous and understanding, like she was the reasonable one trying to fix things while I was having some kind of breakdown. There was no acknowledgement of the years of mockery and cruelty, no mention of how she'd treated me or what she'd said. Just this fake concern about my mental state and her willingness to forgive me for leaving. Jeremy read the letter and asked what I wanted to do. I told him there was absolutely no chance of reconciliation and to proceed with pushing for trial. He looked relieved and admitted he'd been worried I might cave under Lisa's pressure and manipulation tactics. He said letters like this were common in divorce cases where one party realized they were losing control and tried to present themselves as the reasonable one. Jeremy explained that Lisa's attorney probably advised her to make this offer so they could tell the judge Lisa tried to save the marriage, and I refused. It was all strategy and positioning, not genuine desire to work things out. Over the next few weeks, Caroline and I started having regular coffee meetups after work. We'd meet at a shop near the office and talk about everything except my divorce and her letter. She told me about growing up in Michigan with 3 brothers who taught her to be tough and stand up for herself. She talked about training for her next marathon and how running helped clear her head after stressful days. She showed me photos of her condo that she'd bought 2 years ago and decorated herself, proud of having her own space. Caroline talked about her parents who still lived in Michigan and how she visited them every few months, describing family dinners that sounded warm and normal like Kieran's Thanksgiving. She asked me about my hobbies and interests, and actually listened to my answers instead of finding ways to mock them. We talked about books we'd read and movies we'd seen and places we wanted to travel someday. I realized during these conversations how little I actually knew about having normal talks with someone who respected me. With Lisa, every conversation had been a minefield where anything I said could be twisted into ammunition against me. But Caroline asked questions because she was genuinely interested and shared things about herself without using them as weapons. She laughed at my jokes in a real way, not the mocking way Lisa had laughed at me. She noticed when I seemed stressed and asked if I was okay without making me feel weak for admitting things were hard. These simple coffee meetups became something I looked forward to because they reminded me that conversations didn't have to be battles. January came and depositions were scheduled at Delilah's office downtown. Jeremy prepared me for what to expect, saying Lisa's attorney would try to make me look unstable or like I was having a breakdown. We practiced answering hostile questions and staying calm under pressure. The morning of my deposition, I sat in a conference room across from Lisa while a court reporter set up her equipment. Delilah started asking questions about my mental health and when I'd started therapy. She asked if I was on any medications and if my therapist had diagnosed me with any conditions. Jeremy objected repeatedly, saying the questions were inappropriate and not relevant to the divorce. Delilah kept pushing, asking if I'd had suicidal thoughts or feelings of depression, phrasing everything to sound concerning and unstable. She asked about Caroline and whether I'd had an affair, trying to get me to admit to something that never happened. Lisa sat there the whole time with this slight smirk on her face, like she was enjoying watching her attorney attack me. When Jeremy got to ask me questions, he kept things straightforward, asking about Lisa's treatment of me over the years and specific incidents of her mockery and cruelty. He had me describe the night with Caroline's letter and Lisa's response, the video call with her family, and the pattern of belittling throughout our marriage. The next day was Lisa's deposition, and I had to sit there watching her answer questions. Jeremy asked her about specific things she'd said to me, and Lisa's attorney kept coaching her to give minimal answers. When Jeremy asked about the night with Caroline's letter, Lisa said she might have made some jokes, but I was being overly sensitive and taking things out of context. She claimed her family was just having fun, and I never indicated their teasing bothered me. Delilah objected to almost every question Jeremy asked, and Lisa smirked at me the entire time like this was all amusing to her. When Jeremy asked why she thought the marriage failed, Lisa said I'd become boring and stopped trying to make her happy. She talked about how I'd let myself go physically and stopped putting effort into our relationship. There was no mention of her years of constant mockery or the cruel things she'd said. She made it sound like I'd just given up on the marriage, and she was the victim of my laziness. Jeremy asked if she remembered calling me worthless, and Lisa said she might have said things in anger during arguments, but that was normal for couples. She denied ever making me feel bad about my appearance or my job, claiming she'd always been supportive. The lies came out of her mouth so easily and naturally that I sat there wondering if she actually believed her own version of events. After Lisa's deposition, I went straight to my next therapy session feeling completely defeated. I told Mia about watching Lisa lie so easily about everything, rewriting 15 years of history to make herself look innocent. Mia listened, and then reminded me that Lisa's version of events didn't change what actually happened. She said judges see through manipulation tactics all the time, and that's why we had evidence like the videos and voicemails. Mia explained that people like Lisa often believe their own lies because accepting the truth would mean admitting they're not the victim. She said the important thing was that I knew the truth, and I'd stopped accepting Lisa's version of reality. We talked about how hard it was to watch someone lie about you when you can't control what they say or make them tell the truth. Mia reminded me that I'd already done the hardest part by leaving and standing up for myself, and that getting through the legal process was just the final step. February arrived, and Caroline mentioned during one of our coffee meetups that she was staying home for Valentine's Day rather than dealing with the restaurant crowds. She said she usually just ordered takeout and watched movies on holidays like that. I realized sitting there that I felt relieved not to have any romantic pressure or expectations for the first time in 15 years. With Lisa, Valentine's Day had always been this test I failed no matter what I did. If I got her flowers, she'd complain they were the wrong kind or not expensive enough. If I made dinner reservations, she'd say the restaurant wasn't nice enough or I'd waited too long to book somewhere good. Nothing was ever right, and the day always ended with her listing all the ways I'd disappointed her. But this year, I could just let the day pass without worrying about failing some impossible standard. Caroline and I made plans to get coffee that week like we always did, no different from any other day, and that felt perfect. The Wednesday before Valentine's Day, I was at my desk working when someone from reception called saying I had a visitor in the lobby. I walked down thinking maybe it was a delivery, and found Lisa standing there demanding to talk to me. Security was already approaching because she'd been getting loud, and I told her she needed to leave because of the restraining order. Lisa started yelling that the restraining order was ridiculous, and she just wanted to talk to her husband. She said I was being dramatic and she had a right to see me. Security asked her to leave and she refused, saying she wasn't going anywhere until I listened to her. They had to physically escort her toward the door while she kept yelling that I was ruining her life and turning everyone against her. Skylar came down from HR and documented everything that happened, taking statements from security and me about the incident. She said she'd write up a formal report that we could provide to my attorney. I called Jeremy as soon as I got back to my desk, and he said he'd file an emergency motion with the court about the restraining order violation. He sounded angry on my behalf, saying Lisa clearly thought rules didn't apply to her and the judge needed to take stronger action. The contempt hearing happened 3 days later in a smaller courtroom with just the judge, Lisa, her attorney, Jeremy, and me. The judge reviewed the security footage from my workplace and read through the incident report that Skylar had filed. Lisa sat with her hands folded in her lap, trying to look small and sorry, but I could see her jaw clenched tight. The judge looked at her over his reading glasses and asked if she understood what a restraining order meant. Lisa nodded and said she did, but she just missed her husband so much that she wasn't thinking clearly. She said the separation was killing her, and she needed to see me to try to work things out. The judge wasn't buying it. He told her this was her second violation and he was done being lenient. He said one more incident of any kind, and he would hold her in contempt with jail time. Lisa's eyes went wide and she started crying, saying she understood and it wouldn't happen again. Her attorney jumped in, saying Lisa was under extreme emotional distress from the divorce and promised to keep her client in line. The judge said he didn't care about emotional distress because the law was the law and Lisa needed to follow it like everyone else. He extended the restraining order for another year and warned that any contact through third parties would also count as violation. Lisa left the courtroom wiping her eyes, but I saw her shoot me a look of pure hate when the judge wasn't watching. Jeremy called me the next afternoon and said we needed to meet to prepare for trial. He explained that we were getting close now, and I should expect Lisa's attorney to come at me hard during testimony. We met at his office that Thursday evening after I got off work. Jeremy had his paralegal set up a mock courtroom arrangement with chairs, and he sat across from me playing the role of hostile attorney. He started asking me questions designed to make me look bad, questioning my motives for leaving, suggesting I was lying about the abuse, implying I was having an affair with Caroline. The practice was harder than I expected, because even though I knew Jeremy was just acting, hearing someone attack my character made my chest tight. Jeremy stopped after about 20 minutes and told me I was getting defensive, which would make me look guilty. He said I needed to stay calm, answer only what was asked, and not try to justify or explain beyond the basic facts. We practiced for another hour, until I could answer his aggressive questions without my voice shaking or my face getting red. Jeremy said Lisa's attorney would try every trick to rattle me, but if I stayed composed and told the truth, the judge would see through the manipulation. 2 weeks before trial was set to start, Jeremy called saying Lisa's attorney had reached out with a settlement offer. I drove to his office during my lunch break to hear the details. Jeremy had the proposal printed out, and he slid it across his desk for me to read. Lisa would agree to split the house equity 50-50, but only if I paid $15,000 toward her legal fees. Jeremy watched my face while I read through the terms. I looked up and asked what he thought. Jeremy leaned back in his chair and said it was a garbage offer designed to make me pay for Lisa's decision to drag this out. He explained that Lisa had no grounds to demand money from me for her legal fees, since she was the one who'd been unreasonable throughout the entire process. The restraining order violations alone showed the judge that Lisa was the problem. Jeremy said he thought we'd do much better at trial because the judge had already seen Lisa's true colors during the hearings. He reminded me that the house would sell eventually, and we'd split the equity anyway, so all Lisa was really asking for was $15,000 of my money for no legitimate reason. I trusted Jeremy's judgment after months of working with him and seeing how well he understood the system. I told him to reject the offer. Jeremy nodded and said he'd send the response that afternoon. He warned me that Lisa wouldn't take the rejection well and to expect some kind of reaction. I went back to work feeling anxious but also relieved that I didn't cave to Lisa's demands. That evening, Jeremy forwarded me the response from Lisa's attorney. The email said I was making a huge mistake and would regret not taking the deal when I had the chance. It said Lisa was prepared to destroy me in court and expose what kind of person I really was. The tone was aggressive and threatening in a way that made me think Lisa had dictated parts of it herself. Jeremy replied to them with a simple message saying we looked forward to presenting our case at trial. I saved all the emails in a folder on my computer that had grown thick with documentation over the past months. The week before trial, I barely slept more than 3 or 4 hours a night. I'd lie in bed in my apartment running through possible questions and trying to prepare answers that wouldn't make me sound defensive or angry. Work became difficult because I couldn't focus on normal tasks when my brain kept jumping to the upcoming courtroom. Mia noticed during our session that Tuesday that I looked exhausted. I told her I was terrified of getting on the stand and having Lisa's attorney twist my words. Mia walked me through some grounding techniques, having me focus on my breathing and the physical sensations in my body rather than the anxious thoughts racing through my head. She reminded me that I didn't need to perform or convince anyone of anything. My job was simply to tell the truth about what happened in my marriage. The judge would make his decision based on facts and evidence, not on whether I gave perfect answers to hostile questions. Mia said Lisa's attorney could attack my character all day long, but they couldn't change the reality of 15 years of documented abuse. I left her office feeling slightly calmer, but still dreading what was coming. The morning of trial, I woke up at 5, even though court didn't start until 9. I made coffee and sat at my small kitchen table watching the sky lighten outside my window. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline wishing me good luck and saying she was thinking of me. A few minutes later, Kieran sent a message offering to come sit in the courtroom for support. I texted back thanking him but saying I needed to do this alone. I appreciated the offer more than I could put into words, but something about this felt like something I had to face by myself. I got dressed in the suit Jeremy had told me to wear, dark blue and professional without being flashy. I checked my appearance in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the person looking back. I looked tired and nervous, but also somehow more solid than I had 6 months ago when this all started. The courtroom was bigger than the ones we'd used for hearings, with rows of wooden benches and high ceilings that made every sound echo. Lisa sat at a table with her attorney looking polished and put together in a dark dress. Her family filled the first 2 rows behind her like a support squad. I sat next to Jeremy at our table and tried to keep my hands from shaking. The judge entered and everyone stood. Then we sat back down and the trial began. Lisa's attorney stood up and gave an opening statement painting me as a man going through a midlife crisis who abandoned his devoted wife for a younger coworker. She talked about how Lisa had supported me for 15 years through my mediocre career, how she'd built a home with me, how she was blindsided when I suddenly left without warning. The attorney made it sound like Lisa was the victim of my selfish breakdown and Caroline was a homewrecker who'd seduced me away from my marriage. I felt my face getting hot listening to the lies, but Jeremy had warned me this would happen. When it was his turn, Jeremy stood calmly and laid out the real timeline. He explained that I'd endured 15 years of constant mockery and emotional abuse from Lisa and her family. He described how Lisa had responded to Caroline's letter with cruelty and humiliation. He told the judge about Lisa's behavior after I filed for divorce, the restraining order violations, the harassment at my workplace. Jeremy's voice was steady and factual as he presented evidence of Lisa's abusive behavior through documentation, recordings, and witness statements. I was called to testify first and walked to the witness stand feeling like my legs might give out. After I was sworn in, Jeremy asked me to describe my marriage to Lisa. I started talking about the 15 years of constant mockery, the way she belittled everything about me from my appearance to my job to my personality. I explained how her family joined in the ridicule, how they'd made jokes at our wedding about her doing charity work by marrying me. Lisa's attorney objected several times, saying I was exaggerating normal marital teasing, but Jeremy kept bringing it back to specific incidents with dates and details. When Jeremy introduced the video recording of Lisa on speakerphone with her family laughing at me about Caroline's letter, the courtroom went quiet. You could hear Lisa's voice clearly mocking me, her mother and sisters joining in, all of them treating my pain like entertainment. Jeremy also played several of Lisa's unhinged voicemails from after I filed for divorce, her voice getting increasingly aggressive and cruel. Lisa's attorney tried to cross-examine me, suggesting I was too sensitive and couldn't take a joke. She implied I was having an affair with Caroline and using claims of abuse to justify my infidelity. I stayed calm like Jeremy had taught me and simply answered the questions without getting defensive. I explained that Caroline and I were friends, that she'd never done anything inappropriate, and that I'd left because of Lisa's treatment of me, not because of anyone else. Lisa took the stand after lunch and her whole demeanor changed. She sat with her hands folded and spoke in a soft voice, nothing like the aggressive woman I'd lived with for 15 years. She claimed she'd always been supportive and loving, that her sense of humor had been misunderstood, that I was exaggerating normal jokes between spouses. She said she liked to tease me the way couples do, but never meant any harm by it. Lisa talked about how devoted she'd been, how she'd stood by me through my boring job and lack of ambition, how she'd tried to motivate me to be better. She started crying on the stand, saying she just wanted her husband back, that she missed me and wanted to work on our marriage. Her attorney asked if she'd ever intended to hurt me, and Lisa shook her head saying never, that she loved me and always had. Watching her perform was surreal because I knew the real Lisa, the one who'd spent 15 years destroying my self-worth piece by piece. But sitting there crying in her nice dress, she looked like a heartbroken wife whose husband had abandoned her for no reason. Jeremy stood up for cross-examination and walked slowly toward Lisa, who was still dabbing her eyes with a tissue. He asked her to describe the night I showed her Caroline's letter, and Lisa's face went blank for a second before she recovered. She said she'd been surprised and concerned that someone at my work might be causing problems in our marriage. Jeremy pulled out a folder and asked if she remembered calling her sister that night to discuss the letter. Lisa shifted in her seat and said she might have mentioned it to Diana because they talked about everything. Jeremy asked if she remembered what she said during that call, and Lisa claimed she couldn't recall specific words from months ago. He opened the folder and pulled out a transcript while asking the judge for permission to play an audio recording. Lisa's attorney objected, saying recordings made without consent weren't admissible, but Jeremy explained that I'd recorded the call on speakerphone in my own home, which was legal in our state. The judge allowed it, and Jeremy pressed play on his phone connected to the courtroom speakers. Lisa's voice filled the room loud and mocking as she read Caroline's letter in that cruel sing-song tone. Her laughter echoed through the courtroom, followed by Diana's voice, and then the whole family joining in to tear me apart. You could hear me in the background saying Caroline was a good person, and Lisa's response calling her delusional for wanting me. The recording played for 3 full minutes, capturing every cruel joke about my appearance, my job, my worth as a human being. When it ended, the courtroom was completely silent, and Lisa's face had gone pale. Jeremy asked if that refreshed her memory about the conversation, and Lisa stammered that she'd been joking, that couples tease each other. He asked if she thought calling me wallpaper and background noise was normal teasing between spouses. Lisa said I was too sensitive and couldn't take a joke. Jeremy played another recording of Lisa's voicemail from 2 weeks after I filed for divorce, where she screamed that I was pathetic and would die alone. Then another where she threatened to destroy my reputation at work. Then another where she laughed about how no woman would ever want me. Each recording was worse than the last, and Lisa kept trying to explain them away as her being upset about the divorce. Jeremy asked why she felt entitled to verbally abuse me for being upset, and Lisa said she wasn't abusing me, she was just expressing her feelings. He asked if she understood that her feelings didn't give her the right to demean and mock her husband. Lisa's attorney kept objecting, but the judge overruled her every time. Jeremy walked back to our table and picked up Caroline's original letter, asking Lisa to read it out loud to the court. She refused at first, but the judge ordered her to comply. Lisa read it in a flat voice without the mocking tone she'd used that night, and you could hear how sincere and kind Caroline's words were. Jeremy asked Lisa what was wrong with someone expressing admiration for kindness and work ethic. Lisa said nothing was wrong with it, but Caroline clearly had ulterior motives. He asked what those motives might be, and Lisa said Caroline obviously wanted to break up my marriage. Jeremy pointed out that Caroline had waited 2 years and only said something when she couldn't stay quiet anymore, which suggested she'd tried to respect my marriage. Lisa had no response to that. Jeremy asked if Lisa had ever told me she loved me or appreciated me during our 15 years together. Lisa said of course she had. He asked her to provide one specific example of a time she'd complimented me or built me up instead of tearing me down. Lisa sat there thinking for a long time before saying she'd supported me by staying married to me. The judge actually raised his eyebrows at that answer. Jeremy asked what she meant by supported me through staying married, and Lisa explained that she could have left me years ago for someone better, but she'd chosen to stay. Jeremy asked if she understood that wasn't support, that was holding the marriage over my head as a threat. Lisa got defensive, saying she'd sacrificed a lot to be with me. He asked what specifically she'd sacrificed, and Lisa listed things like dating more attractive men or having a husband who made more money. Jeremy let that sit for a moment before asking if she'd ever considered what I'd sacrificed to stay in a marriage where I was constantly belittled. Lisa said I hadn't sacrificed anything because I was lucky to have her. Jeremy thanked her and sat down. Lisa's attorney tried redirect, asking if Lisa still loved me despite everything. Lisa said yes, she loved me and wanted to work on our marriage. Her attorney asked if she regretted anything she'd said in those recordings. Lisa said she regretted letting her emotions get the better of her, but I'd hurt her by filing for divorce without warning. Her attorney emphasized the without warning part, trying to make me look like the bad guy. But the damage was done, and everyone in that courtroom had heard Lisa's true nature. The judge called for a 15-minute recess and left the bench. I sat there shaking while Jeremy put his hand on my shoulder. Lisa and her family huddled together on the other side, whispering angrily. When the judge returned, everyone stood until he sat down again. He looked at his notes for a moment before speaking. The judge said he'd reviewed all the evidence presented, including the recordings, testimony, and documented incidents. He stated that based on everything he'd seen and heard, this marriage was irretrievably broken. The judge granted the divorce effective immediately and ordered our house sold with proceeds split equally after paying off the mortgage. Lisa's face went white when he said that. He continued, saying that Lisa's request for me to pay her legal fees was denied, as she'd chosen to pursue an aggressive legal strategy that wasn't supported by facts. The spousal support request was also denied given the relatively short marriage, Lisa's ability to work, and lack of financial dependence. Lisa started to stand up, but Diana grabbed her arm, pulling her back down. The judge wasn't finished. He said that based on the evidence presented, including multiple recordings and testimony from both parties, Lisa's behavior throughout the marriage constituted clear emotional abuse. He stated that her pattern of belittling, mocking, and demeaning me in front of family members showed a calculated effort to destroy my self-worth. The judge added that her behavior after I filed for divorce, including the restraining order violations, demonstrated a continued pattern of harassment and abuse. He said he saw no grounds whatsoever for any of her financial demands, and frankly found her testimony about supporting me through staying married to be deeply troubling. The judge noted that marriage should be a partnership built on mutual respect and love, not one person holding the relationship hostage while systematically destroying the other person's dignity. Lisa's face had gone from white to bright red, and her hands were gripping the table. Diana was still holding her arm, probably to keep her from doing something stupid. The judge finished by saying the court would monitor the house sale process, and both parties were ordered to cooperate fully with the realtor. He banged his gavel, and it was over. Outside the courtroom, Jeremy shook my hand. He said the judge's statements about emotional abuse were significant because they'd be part of the official record. That kind of finding could matter if Lisa ever tried to claim I'd been the problem in the marriage. Jeremy said I should be proud of myself for standing up and telling the truth, even when it was hard. Lisa's attorney walked past us quickly without making eye contact. Lisa and her whole family stood in a cluster near the courtroom doors, shooting hateful looks in my direction. Diana said something to Lisa, who looked like she wanted to charge at me. Her mother put her hand on Lisa's other arm, and they all left together. Jeremy said to expect some angry messages, but to save everything and not respond. He reminded me about the restraining order still being in effect. I thanked him for everything he'd done, and he said he was glad he could help. Walking out of that courthouse felt strange. 15 years of my life were officially over. I'd expected to feel sad or scared, but mostly I just felt tired and relieved. The house went on the market 3 weeks later. Our realtor said the neighborhood was popular and she expected it to sell quickly. Lisa and I had to coordinate times to let her show it, which meant tense text exchanges through our attorneys. The first showing brought an offer, but it was too low. The second week brought 3 more showings and 2 offers. We accepted one that was actually $5,000 more than our asking price. The whole process took 7 weeks from listing to closing. After the mortgage was paid off and we split the closing costs and realtor fees, my half came to $18,312. It wasn't much to show for 15 years, but it felt like freedom in my bank account. Lisa got the same amount, and I knew she was probably furious it wasn't more. I spent the next weekend at furniture stores with Caroline. My apartment had been barely furnished with cheap pieces from discount stores. Caroline helped me pick out a real couch that didn't hurt to sit on and a bed frame that didn't squeak. We found a decent kitchen table and chairs. She had good taste and knew how to spot quality without spending a fortune. When everything was delivered and set up, my apartment actually looked like a place where someone lived instead of a temporary crash spot. Caroline also dragged me to clothing stores, which I'd been avoiding for years. Lisa used to buy my clothes, and they were always slightly wrong, either too tight or styles that didn't suit me. Now, Caroline helped me find shirts that actually fit my shoulders and pants that didn't bunch up weird. She picked out colors that looked good on me instead of the drab grays and browns Lisa always chose. When I looked in the dressing room mirror wearing clothes that actually fit properly, I barely recognized myself. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I was doing better than I'd expected. Therapy with Mia was helping me work through years of damage. She taught me to recognize my worth and set healthy boundaries. I'd lost 15 pounds not from stress, but from actually taking care of myself, cooking real meals instead of eating whatever was easiest, going for walks because I wanted to, instead of because Lisa nagged me. My apartment felt like home. Work was going well. I wasn't carrying around the constant weight of Lisa's criticism anymore. Caroline and I kept meeting for coffee and lunch. She never pushed for anything more than friendship, and I was grateful for that. I wasn't ready for a relationship, and she seemed to understand without me having to explain. We just enjoyed each other's company. Kieran noticed the change in me, too. He said I seemed like a different person, lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying something heavy and finally put it down. He wasn't wrong. I'd been carrying Lisa's voice in my head for 15 years telling me I was worthless. Now that voice was getting quieter. 4 months after the divorce, Skylar called me into her office. I thought maybe there was a problem, but she was smiling. She said I was promoted to senior analyst with a raise to $70,000 a year. I just stared at her. Skylar explained that my work had been excellent over the past months, and my confidence had noticeably improved. The department head had specifically mentioned me as a strong candidate for advancement. She said whatever I was doing in my personal life was clearly working because it showed in my professional performance. I thanked her about 5 times and walked back to my desk in a daze. Kieran saw my face and asked what happened. When I told him about the promotion, he actually hugged me. 6 months after the divorce, my life looked completely different. I had my apartment furnished the way I wanted it. I had clothes that fit and made me feel good. I had friends who actually cared about me. My job was better than it had ever been. Therapy was helping me understand that I deserved basic respect and kindness. Some days were still hard. I'd catch myself thinking in Lisa's voice, hearing her criticism in my head. But those moments were getting less frequent. I was learning who I was without someone constantly telling me I was worthless. Caroline and I were taking things slow, seeing where our friendship might lead without any pressure. She made me laugh. She listened when I talked. She never made me feel small or stupid or lucky that she bothered with me. We were just 2 people who liked each other. Kieran kept joking that I looked 10 years younger now. My mom said I sounded happier on the phone. Even my coworkers mentioned that I seemed more confident. Life wasn't perfect. I still had bad days where I doubted everything. I still had moments where I wondered if Lisa was right about me. But those moments passed faster now. I had proof that she was wrong. I had Caroline's friendship. I had Kieran's support. I had a promotion I'd earned. I had a therapist helping me heal. I had $18,000 in the bank and an apartment that was mine. I had freedom to figure out who I was and what I wanted. That was something I never thought I'd be able to say. Life was honestly good.